30-27 is the final. Michigan gets it done on the road, guys, and beats Nebraska. It was the game I feel was a little score than should have been bigger than the score indicates. Michigan, I feel, dominated, especially in that second half. But Alejandro, you're on the scene. Let's get your instant reaction.
Yeah, that was the message at halftime. We talked to Biff Poggi after the game and asked him, "Hey, well, what was that message? What did you share to your team after the Hail Mary tied the game at 17 at halftime?" And Biff said he gathered Michigan, he gathered the players, and told them, "Listen, I know the score is tied, but we are whooping their butts up and down the field on both the offensive and defensive sides of the ball." And I think that ultimately played out. The score, as you said, Josh, it doesn't necessarily reflect quite as much how much better Michigan looked. But it was pretty clear, especially after that first scripted drive that Nebraska had, that Michigan was really controlling the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And were it not for a few uncharacteristic, maybe boneheaded plays, mistakes made from maybe coaches and players alike, the game could have been more comfortable for Michigan at the end, but got the result that they wanted, got the result that they needed. They came in kind of hyping themselves up. The fact that they went 1-4 on the road last year and felt like they needed to have a different result here today. I think it was important for Michigan's season and for the state of the program that they came out victorious today in Lincoln.
Yes, Sam. Let's transition over to you. Obviously, Michigan. If you coming into this game, I think a glaring weakness, if you're looking at Nebraska, they gave out 200 yards rushing against Cincinnati in that opener. Played some, let's call it just easy wins, right? These past two opponents. You felt Michigan should be able to run the football today, and they were able to do that. Some big runs again. Justice Haynes with another game breaker, 75 yards. Yeah, Jordan Marshall put the game away there in the fourth quarter, and of course Bryce Underwood again. They didn't run them as much as last week, but they ran them at the end, and that critical drive to ice this game away and put Michigan up 10 there late in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I love Chip Lindsey's plan. You got to commend them for taking what the defense is going to give them. You watched that Cincinnati game, which I watched a good portion of. Brendan Sorsby ran up and down the field on them without any semblance of a passing game. And you're going to have to give Bryce Underwood more respect than that, even as a freshman who hasn't necessarily put up a lot through the air yet, but he's more of a threat through the air with his arm than Brendan Sorsby is. And they respected that. And it was a perfectly dialed quarterback draw that caught him sleeping. And he scored with that. And just that threat of a running quarterback is enough to get in their heads in a way that really, really freaks them out. And they aren't a big front seven. And Michigan was able to move them and overpower them. And if you look at it, I mean, you look at the way they were able to keep them out of the backfield. How often did you see, other than McCullough coming off the edge, you didn't see their defensive front in the backfield blowing up plays before they got started like you saw in the Oklahoma game? Michigan, and this is another key adjustment for Chip Lindsey, and I talked about it with Denard Robinson, outside zone. Michigan has not been a stretch team. It's just been a play that wasn't their specialty. And Chip Lindsey, from the jump, you knew he was going to want to implement that. It's been gradually more a part of the game plan week in and week out. Last week, they ran it 8 times with great effect. In this game, it was a sledgehammer, 75-yard touchdown from Justice Haynes. That was a stretch play. The Jordan Marshall big run was a stretch play. That is a huge element in the equation, that sometimes those plays will hit outside, but sometimes you'll bust them back up in and allow your lineman to come back and steal players off, like you saw Greg Griffin do a number of times. So from that standpoint, before we start talking about some of the mistakes they made, the running game and how Michigan really controlled things on the offensive side of the ball, running the football, I think was one of the big storylines in this contest.
Yeah, Justice Haynes with his 4th straight 100-yard rushing game. He had 17 carries for 149 yards today. Some big runs, a big catch in that screen pass right there in the fourth quarter to get Michigan start converting some third downs, which they weren't able to do earlier in the game, and really just put this game away. I mean, Alejandro, I know we we were in Norman 2 weeks ago. I didn't join you this trip, but the atmosphere looked, just from watching on television, looked like it was is pretty similar. Not, loud atmosphere. How much do you think it benefited Bryce going to Norman 2 weeks ago? Obviously, he struggled, and he's had more of a complete game today. Obviously, more production on the ground. You didn't run the ball with him last and 2 weeks ago, and just that threat. You just sort of saw Underwood. He left some plays out there on the field. I didn't think he played that bad. I think the stats won't say he had the best game, but he played pretty good, I thought.
Yeah, I agree with you. And listen, when we brought it up to Biff, the first thing he mentioned about Bryce Underwood was he had some drops in there. His receivers didn't always do him any favors in the passing game. So I think his stat line could have been better than it looked. But to your point, the experience that he had in Norman, the experience this whole team had in Norman, this game mattered a lot to Nebraska. They brought the 1995 national champions back here. Obviously, it was a sellout. Nebraska always sells out, but this game mattered a ton to this program. They entered 0-27 in their last 27 games against ranked opponents. Imagine that. And they felt like this could be the time they finally, Matt Rule's third year, that they'd finally get over the snide, finally knock off a ranked opponent for the first time since 2016. And for whatever you say about Bryce Underwood, I don't have the box score in front of me. I don't know exactly what he threw for. But the reality is that Michigan was poised before the snap every single time. I don't think there was a single pre-snap, logistical penalty where they didn't have the call in, or they didn't, do a check with me and it took too long, so they had to call a timeout. Bryce Underwood managed the offense in a way that let the team be successful. And back to your point, Sam, about running stretch, you need an offensive line that can do that. Greg Trippin, these last couple of weeks running stretch, has looked really impressive. Biff shouted him out in his postgame press conference, said that this week is the best week of practice that Greg Trippin's had at center. He took command of the offense this week and said that he had his best game at Michigan against Nebraska today as well. So to have a center who, listen, for a couple of years has been biding his time, for more than a couple of years, quite honestly, sitting behind your Olu Oluwatimis, your Drake Nugents, not starting last year when it felt like it was going to be his year. And there were question marks about him coming into this season. These last couple of weeks, I feel like Greg Crippen's really hit his stride. And that amounts to a running game where you've got Justice Haynes, 100 yards, 4 games in a row. First time a Michigan player has ever done that, starting his first 4 games as a Wolverine with 100+ yards. Historic stuff, really impressive stuff. And the sort of thing where you think, hey, maybe he deserves to be in the national conversation, not just among Michigan circles with what Justice Haynes is doing.
Yeah, he's been fantastic, man. And the ability to ride him and get him in play scenarios that are really conducive to his success, I think has been a big deal. And I think, again, Bryce is a part of that equation. The way that they have sort of diversified this run game, both with introducing Stretch and introducing Bryce, I think is going to create more creases for the running backs. And we saw it in this contest, I think. But I just want to touch on Bryce a little bit here. You used the word poise, Alejandro. And to me, poise is not a stat, but his poise stood out to me in this contest. When the play clock is running down to near 0, he gets the ball off and completes it to Justice Haynes, where he's able to run for a first down, right? I mean, huge play in the moment. So, you expect a freshman to be flustered in these situations, to get a delay a game, to maybe put a ball in harm's way. I'm sure they're going to work with him on tucking the football. But other than that, he wasn't putting the ball in harm's way like that. It wasn't his mistakes that were costing them in this contest. And he was making plays with his legs, and then throwing balls that allowed his receivers to make plays, right? The receivers, they are a work in progress too, but Donovan McCulley catching a play short, running for a first down. Samaj Morgan catching a play short, converting that for a big first down. I think you see the passing game a long way away from where it needs to be as far as Michigan is concerned. But to me, the task for the offense and the staff was to be effective with what you can do until you can be effective with what you want to do. And I think they're bridging that gap right now.
All right, guys. Now, think maybe some people want to hear about our thoughts on what happened there right before the half, and then we can start with that. Right, obviously, Michigan let the clock run down. They thought Nebraska was just going to go into the half. Nebraska smartly called a timeout with 1 second left because why not? You're right there at midfield. Raiola rolls out, finds the guy, touchdown, big point. Now it's a tie ball game at the half. Right now and they really didn't do much in the second half. So that was one of the first big mistakes by Michigan. And then you would have to say the Hillman taunting penalty when Michigan gets a 3-and-out, and it leads to Nebraska going down the field and scoring right afterwards. Your thoughts on that? Obviously, that was blowing up the Twitter feed. Everyone had their armchair quarterback opinion on those plays, but I think they're rightfully criticized. Michigan, it was one of those where you felt like hopefully this does not cost them in the end, but it didn't. But still, it was some questionable play calls and decision making there.
Well, Alejandro, did you talk about that in the post game?
They did talk about that in the post game. Biff said, "Listen, in hindsight, maybe you call timeout there," and I think that's accurate. Listen, Nebraska made a play, but I'm always the proponent. If you are defending a Hail Mary and you need, it's a 50+ yard Hail Mary, rush the passer, right? Because the one thing they need is time to get guys into the end zone. So send more than 3, blitz them. Raiola is awful when he's under pressure. We saw that all game. He got sacked 7 times. He didn't get sacked 7 times. He got sacked 6 times. And one time he just sacked himself. So rush the passer, number one. And number 2, I know we were talking about this before we started, Sam, but with, TJ Guy, a very good player, you don't need him defending the goal line. That's not the player you put back there. So I think in hindsight, listen, Biff Poggi, he's not the head coach, right? He's the acting head coach, and maybe that's one he'd like to have back. I think that's when we opened this saying this could have been a larger scoreline, that the Hillman hit. Those were 2 opportunities for Michigan to put this game away early. They didn't do that. They got maybe a little bit lucky, you'd say, to still leave with a win when you make those sort of mistakes. You can't keep making those mistakes and continue being successful on the road. We know that. The players know that. The coaches know that. But it's those sort of little details that need to be cleaned up this bye week. And I hope and I expect that that's something that they take a look inside and they self-scout and they work on those as well. What are your thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, man. Listen, I told you guys a couple of weeks ago after the Oklahoma game, I didn't like the game plan. I thought that was a losing game plan. So when coaches make mistakes, I'll say it. I think this was a coaching mistake. I think you got to call time out there, if not just to see what their plan is, what they're going to do to get your personnel on the field. If you're only going to rush 3, I think you got to get another defensive back or even a receiver out there, as opposed to TJ Guy running back to try to defend the pass. But I'm with you. I'd rather rush TJ Guy in that situation and have my defensive guys, my other defensive guys, worry about the pass. I'd rather have 4 guys getting after the quarterback. But that's a mistake. And hey, I guess it was bound to hurt them at some point not having your head coach, right? Is it supposed to go seamlessly when your head coach isn't there? This was one where not having your head coach really hurt you. And so, I think they would take it on the chin and say, hey, it sounds like Biff did. He said, you want to call timeout there. So it is what it is. And then on the player side, hey, man, you cannot have that. You cannot have, after you make a play to get off the field. This is a moment. Nebraska was on the ropes.
Yep.
They're on the ropes. You get the ball back there and score after you just slam the door on them again, they might quit. But as it stands, you extend their drive and they wind up getting a field goal out of it and they have life again. You cannot have that. That wasn't even a taunting. No taunting is okay, but that wasn't even taunting the player. You running toward the sideline, taunting the sideline. I'm like, come on, man.
And he didn't even make the play. He didn't even make the play.
It was uncalled for.
You can't have that, man. You can't have that. So,
but speaking of pressure, though, obviously they didn't pressure on that play, but that defense created pressure all game long. Alejandro noted that the 7 sacks, that's the most Michigan's had in a game since 2022 against Indiana. 9 tackles for loss. Dominic Raiola was not comfortable in the backfield. Most of his plays, he had a little scramble action. I thought he he got lucky in some regard. He threw the one interception. He could have had a few more. You gotta love what Wink drew up today. They just were able to get pressure with those DNs right off the edge. Barham and Moore, just they're beasts today. You gotta tip your hat to that Michigan defensive front. Sam, what are your thoughts about what they were able to do there?
Go ahead, Alejandro. I mean, you got.
I just wanted to say that unless I missed something in this game, it is shocking that Michigan is 4 games into the season with the defensive line in the edge room that they have and the linebackers, and they have yet to draw a holding penalty. And it wasn't that they weren't happening, because I was shooting this game. I've got photos. Like, I've got, Barham getting armbarred, Derek Moore getting ridden like a donkey. Like, it's just, I can't believe that hasn't happened. There were very few penalties called in this game, so maybe it's a one-game thing, but it's just shocking it hasn't happened. 7 times. And we talked about Dylan Raiola before this week, right? Is that Dylan Raiola, a very accurate passer, a couple things that they haven't wanted to do with him at Nebraska. He didn't push the ball downfield a whole lot in that Cincinnati game. He had only 1 pass of 20-plus yards against Cincinnati. You think a 5-star quarterback in his second year starting would be able to push the ball downfield more? Couldn't do it. That number one. And number two, every quarterback's numbers go down when they face pressure, when they get blitzed. Dylan Raiola's absolutely plummet. You look at his advanced stats when he's under pressure, he just doesn't have that composure, whatever it is. The ability to keep his eyes downfield. I don't know what it is that separates, your average to good to bad when you're under pressure as a quarterback. But Dylan Raiola doesn't have it at this point in his career. And Michigan took advantage. By that 7th sack, it was obvious that he was running off the field. He wasn't feeling fantastic. And that's the sort of thing where, it's 30-27. But Dylan Raiola and Nebraska are going to field this game for quite a few days.
Yeah, their line is garbage. I mean, it's just not good. And granted, Michigan took advantage of that by absolutely pummeling them, and it should have been worse. Like I think about the play where the receiver stepped out of the end zone. I mean, Deshaun Barham is getting disrobed on the play. It shouldn't even gotten to that call. He's getting. His jersey is getting pulled off. Like, what is going on that the refs cannot see what is happening down here around the line of scrimmage? But, for Dylan Raiola, he's not able to push balls down the field because, the one time they don't get pressure is on the Hail Mary. But they were getting pressure with 3, with 4, with obviously when they blitzed. They were getting pressure all the time. And so, to me, this was the kind of game that this defensive front needed. This is what you were looking for, a replay of the bowl game, right? And we hadn't seen it to this degree. Great to see it to open Big Ten play, because you need more of this while your secondary recovers. A lot of people talking about, hey, I think you have problems in the secondary. It's still a triage unit back there. There's still no Zeke Berry. There's still no, Caleb Anderson. You still got your veteran members of the corner room out other than Jair Hill. So you're playing with Jaden Sanders, who had a whale of a game.
Absolutely.
Give that young fella a lot of credit. And Shamari Earls, who's only playing in his second game. Yeah, there are going to be some things that leak through at times. You saw the big bust on the touchdown there. So listen, it's incumbent upon the front 7 to be wreaking havoc, to relieve some of the pressure on that back end. And they did that in a huge way today. Rayshawn Benny. You could run down Derek Moore had himself a whale of a game. All those guys up front ate in a big way, and they need to hopefully have this be a sign of things to come.
Well, now we're a quarter way through the season, guys, and Michigan's looking at they're 3-1. You got a bye coming up, Wisconsin, and then you go to USC. You got to like where they're at. From where they were 2 weeks ago, and how this team has recovered. You'd have to say you feel a lot better about where the direction of this team and where they're going.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. 3-1 looks a lot different than 2-2 going into the bye week. Going on the road without your head coach and going to a place like Nebraska is a tough place to play always. So to come out of that with a win, very important. And just to bounce off that point, Sam, talking about the triage unit back there, got Rod Moore back. It was very cool. Unexpected, maybe a little bit, just because he's warmed up in the past and he didn't start or anything like that. But then all of a sudden, in the first half, you see Rod Moore, you see number 19 jogging onto the field, and had a chance, bumped into him, literally bumped into him post game, asked him how he felt. He said it felt great. He feels great. Happy to be back. And I know the Michigan fans here showing him a lot of love. But 3-1 feels a lot better than 2-2 going into the bye. And you look at what Wisconsin's done these last couple of weeks, you feel like 4-1 is very much on the table as Michigan begins that West Coast trip.
Yeah, well, Luke Fickell will even be the coach by the time they come.
And
by the time they come to Ann Arbor. I think that's a question. They're lucky that score wasn't worth the way Maryland was coming up and down the field on them. But yeah, if you're Michigan, you gotta like where you are. I mean, this was another step for Bryce Underwood. You have incorporated his legs successfully into the offense. Continue to grow him in the passing game. You can show him things that he missed, things that he is easily going to pick up. I think you're seeing strides in the receiver room where they're making a few more plays. You want to continue to grow that. You can get healthier, hopefully get Hogan Hansen back, hopefully get Giovanni Ohadi back after the bye week, and then hopefully heal up on defense as well and round that unit out. Got to shout out Cole Sullivan, who had himself a whale of a day. So as you get that whole unit, or get both units more healthy on both sides of the ball and grow your quarterback up even more, you got to be feeling really good about where you are if you're Michigan playing Wisconsin before you go on the road to take on a USC team.
Well, it's certainly going to be a fun couple weeks as Michigan rests up, gets ready for the Badgers, and I think we all know that USC game is going to be the pivotal game of the season. I think Michigan should be favored the rest of the games before they host Ohio State in November. There's a lot of football to be played before the game, but at that USC game, Michigan gets it done out on the West Coast. You're looking at they have a potential playoff season ahead of them. But hey, it's just 3-1 right now, boys. But this was a huge win for the Wolverines.
Yes, it was, and you get your head coach back. You got a heck of a running game, and I think Alejandro said something that I hadn't thought about, and this is something to look at. I mean, what running back in the country? I haven't looked at the stats, but can you say someone is having a much better season than Justice Haynes right now?
No.
I mean, he's up there, right? He has to be.
I would say it's the Doak Walker. Like, he's in the Doak Walker top 3 conversation right now.
Yeah,
and man, he fits right in on this team, right? He's in terms of a physical runner, a guy who's physical but still has that breakaway speed. It's impressive to watch. And listen, Jordan Marshall had himself quite a few nice carries. Obviously, had the long touchdown as well. But to have a player of Jordan Marshall's caliber, and then to see Justice Haynes and see how much better he is on a down-to-down basis. That's not to negate Jordan Marshall, who's a very good back in his own right. Justice Haynes deserves the recognition that I think he'll be getting these next 14 days.
Yeah, Justice Haynes has been one of the best. You know, it reminds me of my man that transferred from Wake Forest to Michigan State. He's having that kind of entry into the Big Ten. If he has that kind of season, wow. look out.
Yeah.
That's what it's looking like. So yeah, great place to be if you're Michigan. So and Matt Rule, I'm really curious to see what Matt Rule has to say, because guess what, Matt, there were no signs, so you can't blame the signs. He also was talking about how they disrespected us. There's no head. They chose this game for their head coach to be out. I wonder why, Matt. I wonder why Michigan chose this game to sit their head coach out. You know?
Yeah,
I mean,
they that was part of their pregame hype video. They're like, they don't even respect us enough to have the coach here. Well, what's that say about you then, right? Like, what's that say? You can't beat a team without its head coach? Like, not a great look.
Not a great look at all. You're lucky it was this close, Matt.
It was.
Lucky it was this close. So, yeah. It was fun as always, guys. Fun as always, Josh.
All right, guys. Well, hey, have a great evening. Alejandro, safe travels back. That's going to wrap up our TMI recap.